Hello everyone, and welcome to the Games Monster podcast from Extreme Improv. Yes, this is the show where we're going to discuss all things video games and probably very little else. But on the show today, as well as myself, David Pustansky, we are joined by Danny O'George. How are you doing, Danny?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I've got like a bit of a weird pain in the back of my neck. But that's probably just because I've been sat in this chair, doing stuff 24 hours a day. Danny, video games, tell me things.
I can tell you many things. Where should we begin?
Oh, I don't know. Okay, so we haven't actually properly discussed video games before, have we?
I don't think we have. Not in this forum.
Okay, so I don't know, what machines do you have? What kind of games do you like? Let's feel each other out a little bit. See where, if you're like Team Mega Drive and I'm Team Super Nintendo, or if you're Team Atari and I'm an Amiga,
Cool.
we'll find out if we can get along.
Sweet. So currently, as you know, David, I have a PS3 and a PS4. Might get a PS5. We'll see. I do also have a PSP and a Game Boy Color somewhere lying around my room. But prior to that, I did also have the classic PS1 and PS2. I had the classic Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, or Famicom. I don't know how people refer to it.
No, this is the thing. Do you actually have a Famicom?
Not anymore. I can say that in full confidence. But
what did you have, like a Japanese machine?
That's because some people refer to it as the Famicom, some people refer to it as the Nintendo, and I don't know what people prefer, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, okay, so if it's the Japanese version, it's a Famicom. If it came out in this country, it's the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah. So I had the NES.
Okay.
But yeah, and I had the following the Super Nintendo as well. I think we also at one point we did have a Sega Mega Drive, but that went missing.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. How about you, David? I also have a PC, of course, but I don't have many games for it. I'm more of a console person.
Yeah.
What consoles do you have, David?
Do you know what? It's easier to say what I don't have, genuinely. I'm one of these people that rather than sell a console to get a new console or something like this, I will just keep the old console and save longer until I can get another one. I've got almost everything that you can imagine. What I don't have, from the world of Sega, I don't have a Mega Drive 32X. I don't have a Sega. Well, I'm trying to remember what it was called now. The Nomad. I don't have a Nomad, which was a portable Mega Drive.
Okay.
And there's probably something else. In the world of PlayStation, I've got everything: PS1, 2, 3, 4, portable, and Vita. So Xbox. I don't have a Xbox One X. I've only got the original version of the 360. I don't have a PS4 Pro. I'm trying to think what else I do not have. So I don't have a Neo Geo, and there's a couple of more obscure ones. I don't have a Turbo Graphics like the original one. But I've got everything pretty much else. I've been collecting for a long time. So I've got the NES, Super NES, N64, GameCube, Wii, Virtual Boy, Wii U, and Switch. I've got PS1, 2, 3, 4, PS1. Okay, so I've got a PS1, but I also have an original PlayStation. So the PS1 was the smaller version that was half the size. But yeah, I'm quite sad like this. I have everything.
No, it just makes you a committed gamer. I did actually. There's one thing I forgot to mention. I did very briefly have an Xbox 360, but I gave that to my nephews as a Christmas present.
Wow.
But technically, it was mine for a short period.
Amazing.
So
I gave my sister a Nintendo DS, and a couple of weeks ago, it was decided she didn't want it anymore. I was like, well, I'll have it back.
yeah, no, with me, you probably might remember me mentioning this during the Extreme Improv, like actual live stream shows, where me and Donovan Santiago knew each other from a different forum prior to improv.
Yeah.
So Donovan and I used to do live streaming on a website called YouNow. And at the time of us streaming on it, they had like, it's not like it is now, but it was a thing where every streamer or every broadcaster, if they reach a certain milestone in like followers or recruits, people who logged in and made an account for the first time during your stream, you would get certain prizes. So for the Xbox 360, you had to get 360 brand new people to create an account during your stream. And I think I was the 5th person out of 12 to win it. So, and I was like, I already have a PS3. I'm not an Xbox gamer, so it's cool that I won it, but I've got no use for it. I'm going to give it to my nephews who do have an Xbox and give them the 360 as a Christmas present.
Okay, so would you say you feel like console loyalty to like a brand?
I would say so. Like I grew up on the Nintendo consoles, and then my parents got my older brother the first PlayStation. They got him a couple of games. The one which stands out being Final Fantasy VII, which is why, as a kid growing up, you probably see I've got a Moogle there in the background. If you're just listening, if you're not watching, have a little Moogle plushie. Yeah, so I kind of then my loyalties changed to Sony, and yeah, it's been that way ever since.
Wow. I would say, like, in terms of any degree of loyalty, I would say would be Nintendo first. Just because I always like Mario games, Zelda, Donkey Kong, stuff like that, Mario Kart, Pokemon.
Oh yeah.
But well, you know what? Like I like Xbox, I like PlayStation, but to me they don't have the exclusives. Whereas then the interesting thing with Nintendo is they never seem to have the everything else. So in a sense, they're like exclusively not Nintendo.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, it's like as I'm sure we've come up before, like my favorite video game series outside of Nintendo is Resident Evil, which even though at one point it was fairly exclusive to Nintendo, traditionally isn't the most Nintendo of franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are games that I like have to get the other machines to play.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite game of all time?
I have a couple, but my favorite franchise, as you know, would be Final Fantasy. But my favorite game outside of that franchise, trying to think now because I have so many. I can't think of just one, so I'm just going to say just a couple.
Yeah, rattle some off.
So, obviously, I like the Pokemon games in Nintendo franchise. I do also like Kingdom Hearts, which I guess is on the outskirts of Final Fantasy, so I don't know how people will take that. I like the Uncharted series, Tomb Raider, Fallout. But I'm a bit late with the Fallout franchise. I started at 3. I haven't played 1 or 2, which I know is PC exclusive.
Yeah.
But interesting that you bring up Resident Evil earlier. I don't know if you remember when we did the movie podcast, and I said, just before we went into the Resident Evil films, I said, I have a very funny story from my childhood, which I thought would be more appropriate for this podcast than the movie one.
Amazing. Let's hear your Resident Evil story.
So I must have been, I couldn't have been any older than 10 years old, probably like 5 or 6, I don't know, at a very young age. My brother and I were visiting my cousin who had, I think he had the director's cut of Resident Evil, the first game, the PlayStation 1. And my cousin was playing it, my brother and I were watching, and the game had just started. So, you know, as Jill and Barry I think he played as Jill. I'm not sure,
He
but
plays Jill.
when they
Yeah.
go into the dining room, and then Jill has to go into the hallway when she hears a noise, and you get that opening, that first cutscene with the zombie like turning around, and yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
But obviously, my brother and my cousin obviously were a bit older, so they were kind of not as easily scared as I was at the time. So as they were, my cousin had triggered the cutscene. He dumped the controller in my lap, and my brother and him ran out of the room, turned the lights off, and locked the door, leaving me watching this really gruesome cutscene. It's like, yeah, I wasn't happy. So I was kind of put off for a very long time until the Outbreak series came out.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Danny. Right, we'll discuss a lot. There's a lot to break down there. We can jump back and forth with things. And I think already I can tell that we won't be able to cover a lot of stuff just in one. So we'll have to do more. But Resident Evil. So first of all, the thing that really scared me playing that game was when you go the opposite side of the main mansion hallway, and there's the dogs that smash through the window. And I was like, oh my God. But what? Oh shoot! I forgot what you literally just said. It was about. I was about to. That was my non-important point. Then I had a more important point. What were you saying?
It was about the dogs on the other side of the mansion.
No, that's what I said. What did you say?
I said about the first cutscene where you see the first zombie.
Yeah.
And my cousin and my brother had like abandoned me in the room, turned the lights off, and locked the door. And the
Outbreak. That's it. You said you
Outbreak. Yes.
All right. I literally tried to play Outbreak this week. I've been recording like gameplay footage to put out a video series about the genre of Resident Evil games, and I find Outbreak really unplayable. That's the first one that I've played where I've started playing it, and I was like, I couldn't get into this 15 years ago, and I still can't. I just find that the controls are bad. Like my character got knocked down, and then you're moving the control, and they're crawling around, and there's no matter how much you bash the buttons or anything, they don't get up. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. I know
they're probably too badly injured to stand up. You need a healing item.
Well, but yeah, right. Like, but that's because it was designed as an online game. And then when I was like the last character alive, because I was running around for half an hour, I was like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do on this because there was nothing clear in Outbreak.
Sure, I can appreciate that. It's probably not one of the most popular games in that franchise. I appreciate, but for developing my interest in that franchise, I had to rely on that game because
okay. So what was it about Outbreak that got you into Resident Evil?
I don't know. It's kind of like I knew obviously of like the other characters in the main series. I think with Outbreak, it was kind of like not probably multiplayer is the wrong word. You play as a character and you have like two companions who are AI. And I guess it's kind of like having that to fall back on, I guess. And then it's kind of like through playing that and then the File 2 release that came out afterwards, I then got the remaster of the Resident Evil 1 remake on PS3. But prior to that, I then, playing Resident Evil, then developed my interest in survival horror. I then started playing Silent Hill franchise. And I have a couple of other ones somewhere. Obviously, they're covered up by a bunch of crap on my shelves.
Survival horror games?
Yeah, survival horror. So one of the things I like about that, and especially not just console games, but games that you can like play on PC, like free-to-play games as well. One of the things I really like is the multiple endings or the multiple ways that you can get killed. I don't know why, but it's kind of like seeing the creativity is a bit of a fascination for me.
Yeah. Okay, so did you ever play Silent Hill 1 on the PS1?
I didn't know. Again, by the time when Outbreak was released, the next one in Silent Hill to come out was Silent Hill 3.
Yeah, love that game.
But I played the demo of Silent Hill 4. That was the first.
The Room.
Yes. interesting story. Interesting story time. So I was playing the demo one day, and my mother asked me to do some sort of chores downstairs. So I jokingly said, "Fine, can you carry on this game for me?" So I went, did whatever it was she asked me to do, and I came back, and I wasn't expecting this. She was actually playing the game. Like my mother, who, she
Wow.
her venture into video games doesn't really extend beyond things like Candy Crush and the brain training games that you got on the Nintendo DS
Yeah,
or The
certainly.
Sims. So to see her playing this, I was like, "Mum, what are you doing? You're doing better than me as well." So when we got Silent Hill 3, she played it more than I did, and she got further into the game than I did. That's embarrassing.
Wow. Do you know what?
But
Like
also,
Silent Hill 3, I don't know if this is spoiler territory. It's connected to the first one, whereas the second
yes,
one is kind of its own thing. And I think most of them are their own thing. But 3 links
yeah,
into the first one. And I played the first one again recently, and it's amazing how well it's actually held up. It looks like the worst thing about if you go back to PS1 era, 3D games in general, but just survival horror games,
mm,
is every corridor that you're in kind of looks the same. Did you ever play Dino
yes.
Crisis?
I haven't played it, but I've seen people doing like long plays and speed runs. So I'm familiar with the obviously everything looking very similar,
Oh my
if
god,
not the
everything
same.
is. It's a good game. It's just that everything, every corridor looks the same. And playing it again as I have this year, I was like, God, I had to look up like game facts of like, where do I go now? I'm going
Yeah.
back and forth in corridors, and I can't see which key I haven't used or which puzzle I haven't solved. But yeah, okay. So do you still like play Resident Evils of the modern era? Resident Evil, like obviously
Yes.
they've done 2 and
I
3 remake in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I got the remaster of the remake or re-release of the first one, which originally came out on the GameCube, I think, or is that right? The
Yeah, so
GameCube,
Resident
and
Evil
then it was
Remake originally came out as a GameCube exclusive.
yeah,
They then put it onto the Wii, and it was basically the same game. But then about 7 or 8 years ago now, maybe a little bit more, they put out the HD remaster, which came out on the PS3, PS4, and the Xbox
yes.
machines.
That's the one I have. And then I have played and completed the remake of Resident Evil 2. Um, I haven't quite had the time to play Resident Evil 3, but
Give
I've
yourself two
seen.
hours. It's incredibly short.
I know I did hear they did cut quite a lot of content from the original,
They did.
which again I've not played, but I've seen, and I know like one of the boss fights is a giant worm that Jill has to fight like somewhere underground.
Yeah, and
Where
it's
was
gone.
that? But something that you might like, David, because I have seen that you've streamed Resident Evil 3, and since you mentioned Dino Crisis, there is a mod that you can download for the PC version where Jill is dressed as the main character
Regina.
from
Yeah,
Gina, yeah, and all of the monsters, including Nemesis, is a T-Rex or a raptor of some sort.
that's very cool.
So
That's very cool. I don't think I've seen that one. I know that when Resident Evil 2 remake came out, they did a mod so that Mr. X in it was suddenly Pennywise chasing you. And I
yeah, it's
don't. I
amazing.
honestly, I've got so I'm not much of a PC gamer myself. Resident Evil 3 this year was one of the very few games which I got for the PC. Literally because when I was trying to get into doing some streaming, I thought that it would be easier. Actually, it's a lot more challenging to stream a PC game than it is a console game.
Yeah,
And not a lot more challenging, but it's a little bit more fiddly, which makes it a bit of a pain. But um, no, that's very cool. It's very cool. I would recommend Resident Evil 3 remake. If you go in knowing that it's shorter than Resident Evil 2, in many ways, I think they've actually improved on what they did with Resident Evil 2. They've on Resident Evil 2, they had this thing, so you'd hold a knife and the knife would break, and little bits like this. Whereas on Resident Evil 3, they were like, yeah, that was a mistake. And the soundtrack on Resident Evil 3 actually features music, whereas on Resident Evil 2 is just ambience the entire time.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Yeah.
so we can talk some more Resident Evil, but let's backtrack. What else? Oh, so Final Fantasy, you said earlier, is your favorite game series. So, which ones of those have you completed? Which ones have you played to death? Which ones have you, for some reason, never really played?
So I'll start off straight away with the ones I've not played, which is 11 and 14, because
They're
purely
the
because
multiplayer online ones, right?
yes, I've played World of Warcraft and I've played Dofus. I kind of like Dofus if I had to play an MMORPG or some sort of online RPG game. I couldn't really quite get into World of Warcraft, and knowing that 11 and 14 were virtually the same thing, if you boil it down to its basic premise, and the fact that you had to pay a subscription, it was a bit of a turn off for me. But
yeah, likewise.
the one I've played all of the other main games in the series. I haven't played any or much of the spin-offs. I've played World of Final Fantasy.
What's that on?
World of Final Fantasy is on PS4.
Okay.
I don't know if it's on, maybe on PS3, I'm not sure, but definitely on PS4. I've also played Final Fantasy Type 0 and the Dissidia games, Duodecim and NT as well. But from the numbered series, I've completed almost all of them. I've not completed 6, though I am pretty much at the end game. Yeah, I think 6 is the only one of. Oh, and 5. Sorry, I've not completed 5 yet.
You've gone back and played Final Fantasy 1 and 2?
And 3.
So, okay, but 3. So, did you play 3 in its original form, or did you play 3 as like the remade version?
I do have the remade version, the one for the 3DS, but I did find a copy of the Famicom version that someone had put a translation through, so I could play it and sort of kind of understand what's going on. So I've played and completed that, and that as a Famicom game was pretty good. I've kind of played the original first Final Fantasy of the Famicom, but I've otherwise played the remakes that have come since then. Probably my favorite ones, Final Fantasy 4 and Final Fantasy 9 are my favorites.
Ooh, I could not get into Final. Do you know what? Like, I'll tell you which ones I've done. I could not get into Final Fantasy 9 though.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know what? I loved Final Fantasy 7. I adore. My favorite of all time is Final Fantasy 8, which some people find super weird. But
yeah,
I don't know why. I liked it. The fact that it has Triple Triad on it, that card game. I could have skipped out the rest of it and just played Triple Triad. But then when it came to 9, they also put a card game in it. I forget the name of it now. What was the name of the
Tetramaster.
Tetramaster. Didn't enjoy that as much. But also just didn't get into the characters, didn't get into the combat system. I liked Final Fantasy VIII because it was the one where you draw the spells from your enemies.
Yeah.
And stuff. Really good.
Fact,
and also, I preferred the more realistic design of the characters. So when it was suddenly the guy with the lion's tail and stuff like this, I felt like it's a bit more whimsical and stuff. But I think I preferred the slightly more sci-fi look of 8.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. 8. I have 8 was the last one I've played very recently. I recently got the HD remaster on PS4.
Yeah.
Although I figured because it's been ages since I've actually played it since the PS1 days, I thought I would commit myself more into also the mini games as well. And I'm so close to getting the platinum trophy. The only thing that's stopping me is I can't, as of yet, defeat Omega Weapon in Ultimecia's castle at the end.
Okay. I can't. You know what? I can't remember it in enough detail because with the Final Fantasies, I've played most of them. I've completed very few. I've completed 7 and 8. I've got 3 or 4, no, not quite all the way through, about 3/4 of the way through Final Fantasy 6. Because there was a time when they suddenly started re-releasing them all on the PS1. And they came out quite, like, every couple of months or something. There'd be Final Fantasy 6, then Final Fantasy 4 and 5 together. And I was like, well, I'm going to start 5, I think. And so I played that a bit. Then I was like, oh, I should try 4, and played that a bit. Didn't get very far. Then they did the same with 1 and 2. And I think I went for Final Fantasy 1 and found that quite hard to get into.
Yeah, because 1 is like your very generic RPG game. Like there's no character story to flesh out. You're literally just, okay, I'll name this this group after me and my friends, and it's like, okay, it's a very linear storyline, even though it's open world map. Nothing will progress until you do things in the right order.
Yeah.
But from 2 onwards, obviously they have characters with backstories to a degree.
Yeah. And then what else? Okay, did you ever play Mystic Quest Legend or Final Fantasy Mystic Quest on the Super Nintendo?
I did not know. Isn't
Ever
that
heard
the
of
one
it?
where the main character is called? I have. Isn't that the one where the main character is called Benjamin?
Again, it's been quite a while since I played it, but
Yeah.
the idea of it when it came out, it was the first Final Fantasy game I think they put out in the West, and they were like, okay, people don't like RPGs, we're gonna make it a bit easier, dumb it down a bit, and it's actually, for me, it was like, oh, this is really easy just to blast through, and it was quite fun. But when they released it in the UK, they just called it Mystic Quest Legend, and they took the name Final Fantasy off of it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw that like anywhere, like in any gaming shop. I never saw even just Mystic Quest. I don't think I ever saw it. My first
I think
venture into
they
the
did it on
franchise.
there was like one on the Game Boy, which I never had, but on the Super Nintendo I had it. So I've completed that one. And I'm trying to think what else I did. What else I've had? Crystal Chronicles. That's obviously just been re-released.
Yeah, I think that was a Nintendo one, wasn't it? Like
Yeah. So,
Nintendo
but
console.
that was on the GameCube, but now
Yeah,
they've put it out on like PS4 and everything, I believe.
yeah. Actually, another one I've not completed is 12. And that one was the one I struggled the most to get into. But I did pick up the Zodiac edition last month, so I might give it another go.
Yeah. Okay, so
Um,
12. Okay, so like, do you know what the thing is? After about 10, 12 I did get. I never got anywhere near all the way through. But after that point, I got a 13, and I read everyone hated it because it's just a big corridor. And I played it to some degree, and I was like, oh yeah, it is just a big corridor. But
yeah,
I kind of didn't get back into playing it again until 7 Remake came out, which I haven't had time. But I do have it, and it's high on my to-do list.
from what I've played so far, because again, it's another one which is still a play in progress. It looks pretty good. Obviously, some changes that they made, I obviously appreciate, like the new characters, the more fleshing out of the Avalanche group. Some things I do like, but I'm a bit like, okay, I'm not quite sure where they're going with it. Like with Johnny, like it's good that they've kind of fleshed him out a bit more than the original, but there's like that's an interesting way to introduce him in the remake. What's going on? What's his connection with the Avalanche group for him to be? Am I allowed to say? Is that spoilerish? Because it's
Do you know
not
what?
really.
I'd avoid that one just because obviously some people are still going to have it.
Yeah, I'll leave it there then, because I don't want to finish that sentence because it may be a bit of a spoiler. But yeah, you get my point. It's like some of the choices are interesting. Some of them I really appreciate.
So, are you playing through that still at the moment? Did you say?
Yes, obviously due to obviously work and stuff, I've not had the time to fully commit, but it is one of the games that I have kind of put on the back burner. So
Yeah.
hopefully, when I've got a bit more time, I can go back to it and pick up where I left off.
Cool. So what are you playing at the moment?
Um, the last one I played, the last game I played was Among Us, which I believe is rising in popularity at the moment. For those who don't know, it's kind of like it's an online game. You play with up to 9 other people, and you basically have to go around doing tasks whilst also working out which of your group is an imposter and is actually killing off your crew. I've been playing it with Extreme Improv regular Shalita from the Improv Chattanooga group, playing it with her and some of her friends, and it seems pretty fun.
Okay, so I think this has come up once or twice before. How does it? I do intend to look this up, but how does it work? Does it work with voice chat where you ask each other questions, or is it just that you're running around as if because it's kind of like, from what I've seen, it kind of almost looks a bit 2D Zelda-like, where you're just running around on the screen. Is it just that when someone runs off, they can sabotage you?
I suppose to a degree what you said is true. It is obviously, it's a 2D sort of game. There's no like 3D elements to it at all.
Yeah.
The game in its current form has 3 different maps you can choose from, but most people are familiar with the spaceship map. I forget what it's called, but you can, it's primarily text chat, but if you have like Discord, or if you're just meeting up in like a Skype or a Zoom call, you can voice chat instead. But it's highly encouraged that when you're actually playing, that you mute yourself, so that, like, if you're the imposter, for example, you don't give yourself away. And then obviously when someone like reports a dead body, if they call an emergency meeting, you can turn your mics on and you can have a conversation with the other players. But basically, there's 2 goals here. If you're a regular crewmate, you've got to complete all of your tasks before you're all killed off. And if you're an imposter, you've got to kill everyone off without getting caught. That's pretty much it.
Wow. No, it sounds really good, and it does sound so familiar to like the movie The Thing. Like obviously we played the Revenge of the Werewolf,
Yes.
improv, tabletop RPG kind of thing. So I think that's really good, and being able to put that idea into a video game with real people where you're trying to figure it out. That sounds. I should try to get in onto that. Okay. Have you been playing anything else recently this year? Any recommendations for people?
Yes, I got Steam like very late last year. So earlier this year, I found that they had a couple of PC games from what I played in my childhood. If anyone's familiar with the Sierra company,
Is these point and clicks?
Yes, those are the ones. So there were 2 games that I grew up playing from that company. One of them was the King's Quest franchise, and the other was Space Quest.
Wow.
So when I saw that they had released...
What did you play them on when you were younger?
PC.
Oh, okay. I had King's Quest on the Amiga, if you were familiar with that at all.
Yeah, I remember that was the old school. That was probably my very first PC, because being a late 80s kid, my parents still had that sort of software lying around, so my brother and I would play that. I think we played 2 and 4, because that's what my grandparents had.
Yeah.
And then King's Quest 7 came out, which was like an actual disc. And that was the one which I'm most familiar with. And then Space Quests 1, 2, and 3. And then I played 6, which is again on an actual disc, like a CD.
Yeah. Cool. And what do they still hold up nowadays? Is it just the nostalgia?
For the King's Quest, I think it's more for the nostalgia, because for anyone who's not familiar with the King's Quest franchise, the main character is a guy called King Graham. But in the first game, he wasn't the king. It's not until the second game that he becomes the king of Daventry, which turns out is an actual place in the UK, but for the purposes of the game, it's a fictional place full of fairy tale creatures. And obviously, as the game progresses, you get introduced to other members of the family, like his future wife Valenice, their kids Alexander and Rosella. And the seventh one, which I'm most familiar with, you play as Valenice and Rosella. But it's all sort of like fairy tale, like folklore inspired. Space Quest, however, because that, obviously, as it would suggest, it's like futuristic, it's sci-fi, but there's also a lot of comedy elements in it, especially with the narrator from Six. And I think that, as an adult, it's something I can appreciate more because I kind of get some of the humor behind it. So I think that does sort of hold its own. Like,
Okay, so sorry, is that just Six has got the humor, or do the earlier ones have the humor?
I think the early ones do as well, but Six, I think Five has the narration and voice acting as well, but I've not played that. Six, obviously, again, it's the one that I'm most familiar with out of the series, and the narrator, he's very witty, which is kind of like my style of humor also.
Yeah.
But in the Amiga ones and prior to 5 and 6, there is humor in the text that appears on screen, but kind of some of it is kind of lost because there's no voice, there's no emotion,
Sure.
there's no.
Okay, just to clarify, so did you actually have an Amiga, or is it just you had PC versions?
I think we did have an Amiga. Like when I was a kid, we had that kind of PC, and then we got an actual PC with CD-ROMs and stuff. And yeah, I think you could get it on CD, the first 4, but we only had the floppy disks.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's very cool, because the Amiga never properly had a CD. They did release a CD Amiga, but that was more of a console, and then they released a CD attachment so you could play those on an Amiga 1200. But okay, so the thing is, like with the point and click games, did you ever play? So I'll throw a few things at you, which if you like that and you liked when they brought in more humor, did you ever play Monkey Island?
I have not, but it's one which I am familiar with.
Right, so Monkey Island, and like they've done HD remakes where it is literally the exact same game, but they've just swapped out the graphics, which was very clever when they did it, because the graphics that they remade were actually held back by the old ones, because you could press a button to just flip it back. So it meant that even though the graphics looked amazing, it was still very low animation frames and stuff. So the Monkey Island games, any and all of them, but like the first couple, but the second in particular is really great. The third one was the first one where they made it look like cartoony and they had voice acting and stuff. And then there's been several since. But also Simon the Sorcerer, ever heard of it?
I feel like I've heard that somewhere before, but it's not one that I've played, I can say.
Do you know what? Like the first one more than the second, is super funny game. And the main character, he's like a teenage boy or something who has, I think, actually, if I remember correct, he's not particularly magical at all. But he's dressed up like a sorcerer. But he's voiced by Chris Barry, who plays Rimmer in Red Dwarf. And it's just such a funny game.
Yeah, so I feel like I have heard of it, but it's not one that I know. I've not played it. That being said, though, this speaking of like the CD-ROM sort of types of games, David, what's your thoughts on the sort of the 90s style games where they had like FMV, like actual live acting? What are your thoughts on those types of games?
Okay, so interesting stuff. So obviously the first Resident Evil game had live action actors playing the parts. Interesting trivia I read on that recently is they didn't know what they were doing. They literally didn't know that it was Resident Evil, and it took years and years for people to track them down and say, hey, this thing you filmed out in a field one night was part of this. You created this super famous character, and they just didn't realize. That was all right, just for clips here and there, even though the acting can be dodgy. But I think probably what we're more going down the route of here is things like, what was it called? Oh my God, what is the one where it was the huge controversy? Nights. Do you know the one I mean?
Sorry, David, I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, shoot. I can't remember the name of it. It's absolutely killing me that I can't remember it, because I literally have this game What's it called? Nightbreed, Night. Oh my God, FMV games. 1 second, SMV games. I'm going to tell you. Night Trap. Jesus, what was wrong with my
Night
head?
Trap. Yes,
So,
that's the one. I remember.
Danny, did you ever play Night Trap?
Again, it's not one I've played because I haven't. I know the only reason I've not played it is because I didn't have the console that you need to play that specific game.
Yeah.
But I've seen reviews, I've seen gameplay, and I've also seen the multiple endings that you can get. So I think its
you
time,
can get it now on like
awesome.
PS4.
Yeah, I think you can. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if for those again who aren't familiar, it's where you're kind of like swapping through what is essentially live camera feeds of this slumber party happening at a house, and there's like vampires that are kind of trying to abduct them, and you've got to try and save them.
30-year-old spoilers there, but sure.
I think people would have had plenty of time to play it by this point.
That's it exactly. So you've got various cameras, and they all like happen at like in real time. So you have to flick between them. So if you're not watching something, then if a character walks into the room, if you haven't been watching at that point in time, you will miss it. And then if you're watching the right camera, you'll have a very short window where you can press a button to activate a trap to kill off the bad guys. And you can like save people, and there's a few points where you can literally fail the game. But other than that, it's just about, I think, getting multiple endings.
Yeah, and I think interesting fact as well, you can fail the game before you even press the start button.
Is that true?
Like if you
what way?
Like if you at the opening menu, as the guy sort of telling you what you need to do, and you have to press what I guess is the equivalent of the start button to actually begin the game. If you leave it idle for too long, the guy kind of like, okay, this guy's not up for it, end the game, and the game shuts down.
That's amazing. I literally want to try that tonight. I've got it on the Switch, so that's cool. There was another one, because I've just looked up FMV games. There was one called Mad Dog McCree, which was a light gun game. So did you ever come across that?
I've not. Again, it's a title which I've heard of, but I've never played for myself. But one of my first FMV game which I played was it's a very old game called Who Shot Johnny Rock.
Oh, I don't know.
It's kind of like a mafia sort of game. It's interactive FMV, where you basically have to solve who shot the guy Johnny Rock. And I think the game changes. So there's 4 culprits, and it's only ever going to be one of them, but it changes each playthrough. But some of the cutscenes are ridiculous. Funny, but ridiculous. For example, there's one cutscene where you go to this location, and the first thing you see is this woman pushing a pram. And because it's interactive, you can actually kill the woman, but you lose the life because she's an innocent. But as she gets closer, the baby's pram like flips over, and it's like a henchman, a very tiny henchman, and you can shoot it. And you should shoot it, because otherwise he'll shoot you and you lose a life.
Yeah.
So I thought that's interesting why you can shoot that one and progress, but if you shoot the woman pushing the pram, you lose a life for shooting an innocent. It's like they have to be in cohorts somehow.
Yeah.
Games like that are kind of like what I grew up with as well as a pre-console. I think that's the best way I can describe it.
What do you mean by pre-console?
So before I had like my personal first gaming console was the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
But I didn't have one for myself, so I either played my brothers who had the Nintendo, or I would play these PC games.
I'm trying to think, actually. I think the Super Nintendo may have been the first console that I had. I think so. It definitely was. We got that, and then very shortly after, we got a Master System, which was already outdated by that stage, which is the precursor to the Mega Drive.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So what would you say is your favorite console of all time?
My favorite console of all time. Again, I don't know if I can choose just one, but I'd probably say the Super Nintendo is pretty high up there, along with the PS2, and also the Game Boy Color.
Game Boy Color. What was it? Pokemon games? What else did you play on the Game Boy Color?
I played. There was a Tomb Raider game which I played, which,
Yeah.
for what it's worth, I enjoyed, but in comparison to the rest of the series, was a bit meh.
Yeah.
There's a couple of Mario games, including the first Wario game, which I played, and I think that's all I can remember. But I know that there's a couple more games which I played.
Did you ever play? Are you into the Zelda games?
I have played like one of the early Zelda games, but I'll be honest, it's not one that I got into. Yeah, so Game Boy. I played that up until like my late teens, I guess. Just again for the nostalgia and the convenience of being able to play it whilst on the move.
Yeah. Hang on, let me. Can I reach something? See, ta-da!
Nice. That's
So if
the
anyone's
Game Boy
just
Advance,
listening,
isn't
I've
it?
just produced a Game Boy Advance,
Yes.
which is the SP one, which was so much better than the original Game Boy Advance, which you could just basically not see.
Yeah. One of my favorite games to play, or when I used to have it, like as a kid, was Pokemon Yellow. So my granddad gave me Pokemon Yellow as a gift for passing my SATs in year 9. No, not year 9. That was in secondary school. Year 6. There we are. So I was in year 6. My granddad got me Pokemon Yellow, but because he didn't get it from within the UK, but it was still English translated. So the cartridge wasn't yellow like you'd think it would be. It was actually black. So when my school friends would see me playing Pokemon Yellow on a black cartridge, they're like, "You've got Pokemon Black," and it's like, "Yes, we'll say that."
Okay, so I'm just going to ask you straight out: was it a pirated copy?
No, it was a legitimate copy.
The reason I say this is I went to a car boot sale, and I got Pokemon Gold, and it was in the worst broken English / Japanese ever. To the point that there was one point, you come up to a character, and before you have like a battle, they literally just go "F you," and I was like, "Oh!" like this, as like a 12-year-old or whatever. I was like, I can't believe that. I was like, this isn't the proper game. And also, all of the first generation too, but all of the second generation Pokemon, for years I didn't know their proper names because they'd got the wrong names, and and I can't remember what they'd got now, but like you'd come up against like a Rattata and it just says rat, and I was like, well, this is a Rattata, and then all of them had just got like the wrong names, and so the second generation, it took me ages to actually learn what they're supposed to be called because I played through the whole game where they had the wrong names.
Yeah. I think I know it was a legitimate one because obviously playing it, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. And I've since played an emulated version on the PC, and it's exactly the same as the one I played on my Game Boy when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It's just I want to say he got it from Thailand or somewhere in that geographic location.
That definitely sounds pirated, Danny. I'm not going to say it is, but
no, I totally get that. Just from listening to our conversation, it would sound like a pirated copy, but playing it was the real thing. It was just the cartridge, like the sticker on the cartridge was exactly the same. The case it came in exactly the same. It was just the color of the cartridge.
No, absolutely. I mean,
and,
these things did happen occasionally, and if you've still got it, that might be some rarity that's worth more. Because
I still have it.
Oh my gosh! Well, look it up, Danny. Seriously, just like there were like cartridges of The Legend of Zelda on the N64 that were gold, and then later on, when they'd put out the gold one, I think they then just put some out and they were on the traditional grey cartridges, and it's like there's less of one than the other and something like this, which is weird. Some of these little things make them collector's items.
Yeah, I do remember because my cousin, the same cousin who tortured me with Resident Evil, by the way, he had the Zelda games from the Game Boy, and he did have one of the gold colored cartridges. But I just personally never got into that particular franchise. It's
Yeah.
a shame. So I've heard great things, but again, it's interest in time.
Do you know what? You don't have a Switch, do you?
I don't have a Switch now.
If you ever get a Switch, I would say get Zelda Breath of the Wild, just because even though it's very Zelda, it's also very different from everything that came before, and it's such a good game. It's probably my favorite Zelda game, which is for me is saying a lot, just because I hold Ocarina of Time on the N64. And Wind Waker on the GameCube is like, oh my god, they're such good games. And then some of the ones that have come since aren't as good, but Breath of the Wild blows them out of the water. Like,
I've heard great things
about exploration on it is incredible.
I've also heard they did a like a tribute to Robin Williams as well in that game, but no one knows for certain what that tribute is.
Gosh, I haven't come across that, but I'd be interested. Well, it might be Robin Williams named his daughter Zelda.
Yeah, Robin Williams was such a huge fan of the.
So it wouldn't surprise me if they did do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they did, but there's so many possibilities that no one knows for certain which one it is. I think two of the ones that I've heard that I can remember is there's one NPC that you can encounter walking along a trail to and from different places, and there's another NPC who I think is I don't know what he does, but I think he wears like a lab coat almost, and he's encountered in a town or village somewhere, and it's his name that's the supposed tribute, which some people think.
Yeah.
There's many of them, but those are the two which really stick out from what I can remember.
Okay. So what else did you play on the Super Nintendo? Did you play the Mario games?
Yes, I did play. In fact, I had a cartridge called Super Mario All Stars.
Yeah,
where he played 1, 2, 3, and the actual number 2. Which was not released properly in the Western world. So what is Super Mario 2 from our perspective is a completely different game in Japan outside of the Mario franchise, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Doki Doki Panic it was originally called.
Yeah.
And well, when they made Mario Brothers 2, they were like, this game's really hard. It's exactly the same. And it's just it's too hard. So they were like, do you have another game? And they were like, well, we've got Doki Doki Panic. It's like, we'll make the main character Mario, and the rest is history. But I actually really like Super Mario Brothers 2 that came out as number 2 over here. I really like that game. It was the first one I completed, in fact.
No, that's cool. I think I eventually completed it on an emulated version on the PC. But I could never get very far with it on the actual Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I remember what you were saying. If the actual Super Mario 2 was quite hard, the only thing I can remember from it is not being able to get past the first level, and the very first thing which killed me was the first question mark block that you hit has a mushroom that comes out that actually kills you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, that's such a cruel thing to put as the very first thing you encounter in a Mario game.
Do you know what? And especially, so Danny, have you ever, like, how I say, have you ever, right? Have you been to arcades where there's arcade machines?
Yes.
Because these things used to be like all over the place. You'd go to Trocadero in London near Piccadilly Circus, and there'd be like four levels of it, and it's all gone now. But even like when you go to seaside towns, there's a lot less. But you used to get Super Mario Brothers as an arcade machine. So really? I can imagine if they did the same with Super Mario Brothers 2, they'd put the arcade machine out, and everyone's like, oh yeah, I've bossed Super Mario Brothers. They go on to the second one. Here comes, it's a purple mushroom, and it kills you. Insert coin.
Yeah, I mean, I never really saw, like, I have been to arcades especially Trocadero in London before it closed down.
Yeah.
In fact, the only thing I played in there was the DDR dance mat sort of thing.
Oh,
But
really?
that's a story for another day.
Sure.
But no, the one arcade game which does stick in my mind is the Simpsons one.
Yay.
Where you can play as I think you play as Homer, Marge, Bart, or Lisa, or if you've got enough people with you. And I think it's Maggie is kidnapped by Mr. Burns, and you've got to. It's like a side-scrolling beat 'em up game. You've got to progress to Mr. Burns's mansion, and you've got to rescue Maggie. But that one was a bit weird.
Yeah, do you know what? I really like that game. And it took years and years. If you're a fan of The Simpsons, it took years and years before they did another decent Simpsons game. Because so many of the early Simpsons games, if you ever played them, there was one called Bart versus the Space Mutants.
Yes.
It was just super hard. Like you get to level 2.
Oh yes.
And it was just incredibly hard. There was a Simpsons wrestling game on the PS1. Just most of them are terrible.
Yeah, especially that wrestling one. But for the Bart versus the Space Mutants, I personally got as far as level 3 before it got too hard for me. My dad, I remember playing it, and he got to level 4 out of 5 because I didn't know there was a 5th level after that 4th one. But he got to the 4th one and got halfway through the level and couldn't get any further.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite. Oh no, there is a harder game than that though. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Or well, have you ever heard of Battletoads?
Yes.
So some of these 2D beat 'em ups have got like legendarily difficult things to it, and I think it's really mean when you get something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where it's like as a kid you're like, oh, I want to do really well, and they just like, nope, it's too hard.
Yeah, and I think everyone who's played it would be in agreement that the dam level was the tipping point for most. Especially there's a point for those who haven't played it. There's a portion of that level. It's an underwater level for a start, which is already bad enough. But there's a portion of the level where you've got to navigate through this very tight. I'm going to refer to it as a corridor, but there's like on the walls of this corridor there are these electrified wires or eels or whatever, and it's very hard to not get hit. And very difficult to get to the other side without dying.
Yeah. There are some games that are just insanely hard. Do you like games that are particularly hard, or I find them off-putting more often than not?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an example of like what I'd consider is a hard game I've completed.
I mean, I do like a bit of a challenge just whilst you're thinking of one. But yeah, if it's like ridiculously hard, like I will lose patience with it, and it's kind of funny because in the show we did last night, Cappy said that I'm too nice to play like a mean character. But if anyone if anyone wants to see me play Crash Bandicoot, the first game, that one level, the sky level, and you got to cross the broken bridge. I don't think I've ever sworn so much in my life.
Yeah, do you know what? I've never completed Crash 1 just because it's too hard. It's too hard. Like, and the fact that you have to collect all of the boxes to be able to save. That is an example of a game which is, in my opinion, too hard. There are some others, like some of the Resident Evils, like one of the more modern ones. They can be very hard, but once you get through it, and then they reward you with the bonus weapons, they become easier and easier, and it actually encourages you to want to keep playing, which is, I think, very smart. But there was a game on the PS2, the X-Files Resist or Serve or something like this, which was a Resident Evil style game. Got as far as the final boss, could never beat it because it was insanely hard to beat. It would keep regenerating its health. You couldn't do much. And also, one of the other things, I don't think this was too bad, but I hate on games where you'd get to a save point, load it, and then you'd play for 15 or 20 minutes to get to the thing where it's like, oh, and I got killed again. Got to go back another 15 minutes to get killed again. And so I give up, you know. Stuff like that,
Yeah.
I find frustrating, perhaps more than hard. But they make things artificially hard by making it so you have to go through so much to do it again.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of reminds me of Zombie U, or Zombie as it's now
Yeah,
known, where you play as one of the modes of that game is you can play as just the one character, and it's permadeath. So
yeah,
if you die, you've got to play it from the very beginning again. I gave that a go because I thought, okay, I've beat this game like twice, so I could probably handle doing a solo run. I got as far as the point in the game where you lose all your inventory, and that's where it went downhill. That's where it got a bit too challenging for me.
yeah. Yeah, it's stuff like that. It's like actually on Resident Evil remake, they had invisible enemy mode.
Yes.
Did you ever play that? I gave up really
No.
quickly. I was like, this is
I
pointless.
I don't think I would be able to handle that one. That's a bit too much of a challenge. But I've seen other people give it a go. So I think you have to have a pretty good knowledge of where everything is to
Yeah,
even attempt it.
and for me, that means that you're kind of just like learning it like a script in a sense, where it's like, oh,
Yeah,
and then this happens here and this happens here. And it doesn't come so much about your skills, just about do you remember where everything is?
yeah. And there was another one where you have like a zombie that is forever chasing you throughout a good portion of the game.
Oh, on
And if
Resident
you
Evil, that's where it's got like
yes,
a grenade. Yeah.
yes, and if you so much as shoot it, it's game over because it blows like the grenades on it kills
What
you
is that
in the
called? That's called
process.
like one something zombie mode or something like this.
No, because the rest of the enemies are still there as well, but
No, but
it's the
like it's the name of the mode. I'll look it up just whilst we're saying about it. But Resident Evil with grenades. What's it called? One zombie with grenades. Bomb
yeah,
zombie mode. One dangerous zombie. It was called One
yeah,
Dangerous Zombie.
yeah, and I think it runs after you as well, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
almost like a Crimson Head would, but it's a regular zombie. Um,
Did
I
you think?
think.
Okay, what did you think of the Crimson Heads? Because that was something that was new in the
Hmm.
remake of Resident Evil, and then they never brought it back on any game since. And it seemed a
Yeah,
good idea.
yeah, I would agree. I think it certainly adds a new element to the game, whereas the standard zombie was just like the slow shambling corpse, as it were. Whereas the Crimson Heads offered something a bit more of a slight challenge because it runs after you for a start, and to prevent it from appearing in the first place, you've got to do a headshot, which in and of itself isn't always guaranteed either. So
Yeah. I'm trying to think actually if on the Resident Evil 2 remake, did they make it so you could burn the bodies on that?
I don't actually remember, if I'm honest.
No,
You
don't
probably
worry.
could.
I've
Oh
got
no,
a
no,
feeling that they did.
it was the first one, the first one where the Crimson Head appears. You could burn the bodies as well. That would also prevent
Yeah, but
them
I'm trying to
from.
remember if they did have something like that on Resident Evil 2 remake. But either way, they didn't have it on Resident Evil 3
Yeah,
remake. That is.
I'm not sure that they did have it in the remake of two. I know that you could, if you shot at the zombie in a certain part of its body long enough, you could, for example, you could shoot its arm off or its leg.
Yeah.
Um, I know that, but I don't think you could burn them. I'm not sure.
No, perhaps not. Perhaps not. But it was a shame that they didn't carry forth that continuity. The Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes are great, but they were huge
Hmm.
wasted opportunities to correct some of the things from the earlier games or to enrich the continuity. They
Yeah.
kind of like made them a little bit their own thing, and for as many things as they added in that were cool, they like forgot things like the giant worm. They forgot the
Hmm.
entire clock tower area where you go
Yeah.
against the giant worm in Resident Evil 3. Um, but one of the biggest one for me, and this is tiny spoilers, it's not a massive spoiler. On Resident Evil 2, when the original version came out, they made that game, but then they decided that Resident Evil 3 would be semi prequel, semi sequel.
Yeah.
And you go into the police station, and there's a bit where the Nemesis character that chases you through the game bursts through a window. And when I played that, I was like, but that window isn't broken in Resident Evil 2. How can they do this? They've broken their continuity. And literally, to stop you from going to some of the street areas that you go to in Resident Evil 2, there are stacks of cars 24 hours earlier. I was like, did the zombies remove these cars? Right. But they had the opportunity to make these games more connected when they did the remakes.
Yeah.
And literally, it was only when they put out a demo of Resident Evil 2, say, hey, we've announced Resident Evil 3, play the demo of Resident Evil 2. They made it so you could hear Nemesis going, stars, in the background at one point. Yeah, and it's like, why wasn't that in the actual Resident Evil 2 remake? Because they must have known that there'd be, well, even if they didn't know that they'd be remaking 3, if they put that in there, everyone that bought 2 would be like, oh my God, please remake 3. So it was a wasted opportunity. But
one other thing as well, from again, I've not played 3, but I've played 2, but I've seen footage of people playing 3, and in is it spoilish if I reveal what happens to Brad?
No, just because it's the same story from 20 years ago. So
yeah, so in the remake of 3, you know that Brad becomes a zombie.
Yeah,
and you as Carlos have the option to kill him. But if you let him live as a zombie and you just go past him into the police station, Brad eventually does make his way in, and you kind of see him like as you enter the armory, the locker room, sorry, and Brad sort of bursts into the room after you walk in. So in 2, there's no trace of Brad whatsoever. So I get that it's circumstantial, but it's kind of like, it'd be cool if they did something like that in hindsight.
Well, see, this is the thing which I always wanted them to do, because you meet the character Marvin in Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
And in the original version, when you find him in the same room in Resident Evil 3, he's already dead. And it's like, but he's not dead later. This is a prequel.
Yeah.
And
unless he was sleeping.
Well, yeah, but in Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake, the characters like Brad, whereas they feels like, well, this is a modern game, they can expand upon it. Brad is over and done with even quicker in the remake. He does later turn up at the police station, like you mentioned, but again, his scene is all of 10 seconds long, where you see Marvin for 10 seconds. And it's just a huge wasted opportunity. One thing where they do actually do something that was on my to-do list, my bucket list for them to do, which again is tiny spoilers if you haven't played it. On Resident Evil 2 and then Resident Evil 3, the original version, some of it crosses over to the same locations. It's like, why are there none of the same monsters? They should have just reused one of the zombies, because you see the same zombie come up time and again. It'd be like, well, they should have had the girl zombie from Resident Evil 2 just outside or something like that, because she's recognizable. But then on Resident Evil 3, they've got the zombies look a lot more decayed, and then you never see a licker. You do see the zombie dogs, but you never. Then you come up against like brain sucking monsters or whatever else. Yeah. But on the Resident Evil 3 remake, in the police station, they do add in a licker, which was never in the original game. And that's super interesting that they did that, just because it's like, okay, that's something which is the fan service that everyone's going to be like, well, yes, we know there are lickers in the police station, so there should still be 1 or 2 for us to find. And they did actually do that, but they just didn't do most of everything else they could.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, it doesn't make sense, but I get where you're coming from. I say I should probably see if I can get hold of 3 and have time to play it. I am familiar, it's not a very long game, but it does look pretty interesting from what I've seen.
Yeah, and do you know what? Like, at the moment, because it's Halloween, there's going to be all of like the sales and stuff on all of the survival horror games this time of year. So it's a great time to actually pick them up. But I would easily recommend Resident Evil 3 remake, just because even though it's not a long game, the difference is Resident Evil 3 remake I have played through about 6 or 7 times, whereas Resident Evil 2 remake I've played through twice, 1 time as each character. And I do intend to go back to it. But when you know it's like, right, I'm going to start this now, and it's going to take me 10 hours to get through it, versus I think I'll play Resident Evil 3, and in 3 hours' time, I'll be done. You know, it's not the same. It's not as much a commitment, which is why, going back to Final Fantasy, that I've restarted Final Fantasy VII twice, had other distractions come up in life, and never gone back to them. So with the Final Fantasy games, well, if you know it's going to be, well, this is 50 hours to get through. For me, it's probably, I've learned that I'll play a Final Fantasy game through once, and I probably won't instantly want to start back and have to play, especially if it's very grindy, and go through it again.
Yeah. In fact, I was just thinking, actually, are you familiar with a game called Martian Gothic?
I've heard of it, but no, I've not played it.
It's again, for those who don't know, it's basically Resident Evil, but it's set in space.
Wow, what system's it on?
I think it came out on PS1.
I'm going to hunt down that game.
Yeah, basically, it's same tank controls as well. But basically, it's a system where there's 3 playable characters, and you alternate between each one at different points. But it's all happening in real time. So, for example, if you have a character in a room with not a zombie, because they're not zombies, they're something else.
Yeah.
But if you leave a character in a room with one of them in there, and you switch to someone else, that character is still vulnerable, and you'll get notified if and when they start getting attacked. And if one of your characters dies, it's game over. So they can't go on without each other for some reason. But it's interesting, and also you can't have any of them meet up at the same time until the very end of the game. Otherwise, again, it's an instant game over, because they're infected with one of 3 different strands of alien bacteria, and if even 2 of them meet up, they merge, and then they track down and merge with the 3rd one, and they become this sort of mutant trimorph sort of thing. It's a very interesting game. I've seen footage of it. It's very much like the first 2 Resident Evil games, I think.
Oh wow!
I think
this is a game which, I don't think I've heard of it, so I've probably seen it over the years. But like I said, at the moment I'm making a video series about this genre of game, which I hope to get done at some point. But at the moment, I've just been playing through games, gathering footage and stuff. So that would be an interesting one if it's going back to that PS1 era of them.
Yeah, and so it's not one that I personally have played, but I if they remade it, like they did the 2 and 3 Resident Evil games, I probably would play it just for the interest alone.
Cool. Danny, on that note, let's wrap things up here. I'm sure we can do another one another day. But let's just find out where we can find each other on social media, or where the audience can find us. We already have each other on social media. So, Danny, where can anyone find you if they want to?
So I actually don't have public social media, but I am part of the Portsmouth Improv experience, which you can find on Facebook as Portsmouth Improv. I think I'm also doing the show tonight, the Night of the Living Dead one, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Also, the Revenge of the Werewolf tomorrow with the Extreme Improv group, and on Saturday as well.
Yeah, so it's a busy old time. I'll try and have this podcast out, probably not tonight now, but probably tomorrow during the day. But for me, my name is David Pustansky. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at David Pustansky. For Extreme Improv, this is the Games Monster podcast, which you can get on all major podcast platforms, as well as this video version, which is on going to be on facebook.com/Extreme Improv, and the main place I like to push, which is youtube.com/Extreme Improv. So smash that subscribe button, guys, and happy gaming, and see you next time.